And welcome to Climate Chat. I'm your host, Dan Miller, and today we have a very special guest, the chair of the California Energy Commission, David Hochschild. David, welcome to Climate Chat.
Good morning. Good to be here.
So I thought a good place to start would be for you to tell us, what is the California Energy Commission and what does it do?
Sure. Well, the California Energy Commission is California's primary sort of energy and policy planning agency. We have about 800 full-time staff. It's our 50th anniversary this year. And we do a sort of whole fruit cup of different activities, all geared towards getting California to 100% clean energy future. So, for example, when you build a new home or a new building, that has to comply with what's called Title 24 energy efficiency standards. We rank #1 in the United States on energy efficiency, requiring electric heat pumps and solar on the roof and dual pane windows, LED lights, and so on. We operate what I believe is the best clean energy research and development program in the world, the EPIC program, which funds all these next generation battery technologies and solar and wind and efficiency measures, load management, and so on. We do all the power plant siting for large power plants, which are predominantly solar and batteries today. So those are being built and installed around the state. We have a number of other programs running tribal energy microgrids and long duration storage, direct air carbon capture. And then we handle a lot of really sticky issues around managing grid reliability and coordinating among agencies, managing our SB 100 process with the Public Utilities Commission and the Air Resources Board, and now quite a bit of time as well on managing the refinery situation in California so that we don't have premature exits that disrupt the market as we are transitioning to electric vehicles. We also do all the funding from the state of California for electric vehicle chargers. We have now more EV charge plugs in California than we have gasoline nozzles, and a bunch of other bells and whistles. So that's a quick high-level tour through the California Energy Commission.
So before we get into the details of like this transition and some of those technologies, what's a bit of your background and what was your path to becoming chair of the CEC?
Yeah, so I've been in clean energy for 25 years. I was completely lost and adrift after college. I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. Bounced around, led outdoors trips for inner city kids, did some internships, Union of Concerned Scientists in various places. And then I ended up in South Africa. My father is a journalist and was writing a story about Nelson Mandela campaigning for the presidency after he had been in prison for 27 years. And he asked me, did I want to come with him? And I said, hell yes. So I went with my dad, this would have been 1994, to South Africa. Had an incredible experience. I realized I wanted to go back. And so I worked it out to go back and live and work there in a township in the Eastern Cape. I was working for a youth program that Mandela was running. So I was living in a township, teaching, doing community service projects. And one of the things that the ANC government did very early on at that time is they provided postal service to the townships, which had really not had the ability to send mail or postcards for the communities there. And they were all solar powered with batteries. And so here you have this community with very intermittent and limited electricity. And my office was right next to this, government provided postal station that lit up at night with the batteries. And it became a little community gathering spot, and people would come and do their mail there. And anyway, I was very intrigued at the possibilities that solar power seemed to offer. Up here, you could plop something in the middle of nowhere and have light. And I really got intrigued by the potential of solar. So went back to grad school. I went to the Kennedy School of Government. That was a 2-year program. I had a summer at the White House, which was awful. That was the summer of the Monica Lewinsky scandal in the Clinton administration, and nothing got done. So it was a summer that dissuaded me from federal service. I just really wanted to get stuff done. And so I went back to my hometown, San Francisco, where I grew up. Was fortunate to get a job with then Mayor Willie Brown. And I learned a ton from him. It was sort of City Hall at that time. I really think of it as sort of a um, university of politics and how you get big things done in a super diverse, city. I mean, I did advance for Willie Brown on the 1999 campaign and watched him go in and navigate with the Russian community, the Armenian community, the Mexican American community, African American community, Chinese American community. There were two women leaders of Chinatown at that time. They hated each other, but they both loved Willie Brown. And seeing how he made his way through all these different communities and got things over the finish line, I learned a lot from that. And then in November, well, I guess it would have been the summer of 2001, we started having outages on the grid. They're just blackouts one day after another after another. The power's going out.
Right.
Schools, grocery stores, banks, businesses, and we didn't know what the hell was going on. This has never happened before. We now know, of course, that was deliberate and caused by market manipulation from companies like Enron seeking to raise prices. But at the time, we had no visibility on that. But we organized an energy fair to pass out high efficiency light bulbs and encourage conservation. And then, along with some colleagues, most notably then Supervisor Mark Leno, who went on to be in the state legislature for a number of years, we organized a $100 million bond initiative to put solar panels on public buildings. I had been involved in a bond initiative for the park system before that. So I saw what could happen if you get a bond passed. And so I decided to go all in on this. I quit my job. We raised a bunch of money from donors and I campaigned full time for that. I had a good friend of mine from college, Adam Browning, who was working for EPA Region 9 on the toxic release inventory program, fighting the bad stuff. And he really wanted to get into promoting the good stuff. And so we both went all in on that thing. And it passed with 73% of the vote in November 2001. And we ended up doing solar panels on Moscone Center, on the airport, Sunset Reservoir, schools, City Hall, and so on. And I decided that I really wanted to just follow this passion and interest. And we created an organization called Vote Solar, really to do barrier busting to bring solar power mainstream. And so that grew to about 50 staff working in 25 states on a whole suite of policies that are really tailored just to solar because it's so unique. Of course, you can't put a coal-fired power plant on your roof. But you can with solar. It's so modular. You can do it for schools, for commercial buildings, for homes, and so forth. But those all required very specific interventions, interconnection standards, and rate design, and tax credits, and incentive programs, and the like. And so we got really deep in the weeds on that. I did that for a number of years. Really, the premise of that work was that there was a very, for me at least, a very compelling cost reduction trajectory at that time, which is still true today, which is basically if you every time you double global demand for solar, the price goes down about 20%. And that had been true for the previous 30 years. So even at this time, 25 years ago, solar was, while it had come down in price quite a bit from many decades before, it was by far the most expensive and the smallest segment of the power market. So that was the priciest, but we saw the promise and really felt the way to drive solar mainstream is to get to scale with the right policy interventions, and then it'll become the cheapest. And that is in fact what has happened. So solar panels, when I started, were about $5 a watt. We're now down to roughly 20 cents a watt. And falling, and we're not done with cost reduction. So I did that for a number of years. Then I got recruited to run a trade association of solar manufacturers. Did that for a couple of years. Then I worked for a company in Silicon Valley that was doing a next generation solar panel and I did that for about 5 years. And then in the course of that, I was working with then Governor Jerry Brown on net metering policy, and there was an opening at the Energy Commission, and that seemed really compelling to me. And so I jumped in, put my hat in the ring, and got appointed. And that would have been in 2013.
Okay.
And served as a commissioner. We have 5 commissioners, but then when Gavin Newsom came to office in 2019, he appointed me chair, and we were really able to lock in on a lot of our core goals around rapidly expanding clean energy and building electrification and transportation electrification and some of the other priorities. And it's been the honor of my lifetime. Absolutely loved it, and really blessed to have an amazing set of colleagues I get to work with and professionals on staff. So very grateful.
You have some interesting predecessors too. I'm friends with Rusty Swikart, who was
the astronaut,
former Energy Commission and Apollo astronaut. I mean,
he's an amazing man. Yeah,
amazing guy. Well, look, I had a question for later, but let's just jump right into it since you brought up the idea that solar is cheap and getting cheaper, and I understand 2/3 of the electricity in California is generated by renewable or clean sources, I should say. Yet we have the second highest electricity rates in the country. I pay 49 cents peak and 30 cents off peak when the U.S. average is 17 cents. So what's going on there? Why given that we have so much inexpensive renewables, why is California's electricity cost so high?
Yeah, well, I pay the same rates, and this is happening across the country. And part of what is going on here, if you unpack this, it's not because solar is expensive. Solar is cheap. It's because climate change is making it harder to fight climate change. The number one driver of upward rates lately, really, I mean, if you look at the curve over the last 25 years, relatively stable until 2019, and we had the just worst wildfires in the history of the state, and those require super expensive responses. Utility undergrounding is very costly. Vegetation management, very costly, and there's a bunch of infrastructure that is expensive. So I think the good news is that, in my view, this is a very solvable problem. For electric rates in particular, the sort of virtuous cycle that I am doing everything I can to kind of steer us towards is one of really rapid electrification. So if you think about your bill, when you are paying that monthly check, 2/3 of the check that you're writing is not going to electricity. All right, 2/3 is going to transmission, distribution, and other grid upgrades. Okay, so even if generation were totally free, right, zero cost, you still have a very hefty bill. The majority of your bill
It'll still be higher than the
correct
national average.
And so what you get when you electrify everything is actually a downward force on rates, because those fixed costs are then being spread across many, many more kilowatt hours, right, as you're selling more kilowatt hours. So for example, we're adding 1,300 electric vehicles a day. So about two electric vehicles is roughly equivalent to the energy demand of a house. Okay.
Sure.
And so you're getting a lot more energy demand that is then in turn bringing in a lot of revenue. So those drivers, instead of going every week and sending money to the oil industry at a gas station, you are contributing those funds to the electric grid. And the same thing is happening the other ways. So we're now focusing very intensely on the adoption of electric heat pumps in California. We set a 6 million heat pump goal. We're at about 2.2 million. We are moving construction all electric. So a decade ago, roughly 1% of homes were built all electric. Now we're over 80%. It'll be much higher starting.
80% of all new homes are
correct.
No gas and no gas connection.
Correct. Yeah.
Wow.
And then there's a bunch of other electrification projects that are underway that are all helping. So just as if you'll indulge me for a second, I spent this last week leading a tour with some colleagues of electrification sites. We had state legislators from 18 states come to California. And, the stuff that is happening now in our state is super exciting. We went to Oakland, which is the first city in the United States to fully electrify their school bus fleet. 74 buses, 74 chargers, largest vehicle to grid project in the US, and more of that to come. We went to Monarch, which is doing electric tractors. We went to Viridian, Richmond, which is doing electric construction equipment and mobile battery electric generators that can replace a diesel portable generator. We got a tour of the San Francisco Bay from SF Bay Ferry, which is now constructing the first battery electric ferry fleet in North America. Energy Commission is paying for the chargers for that. Of course, Caltrain connecting San Francisco to Silicon Valley has electrified as of last year. And we went to go see Copper in Berkeley, which is doing advanced electric induction stoves. Gradient in San Francisco doing next generation low cost heat pump technology. So all this is electric, and as all this stuff scales and gets to market and displaces end use fossil fuel use, it will help with rates, because that is going to bring a lot more revenue in and can kind of lower the bill over time. And I think there's some other actions to be taken, but I think that is a big part of the long-term strategy to bring down rates.
So, well, and let's throw in another question that was for later as well, that's on the same subject. AI and data centers around the country are increasing energy demand and causing rates to go up because of the very high demand, and I guess the supply isn't keeping up. Is that impacting California, and is the CEC involved in trying to address the issue of what's predicted to be a very significant increase in energy use by AI and data centers?
Yeah, so there's certainly a lot of talk about this right now. It's a little unclear exactly how significant that load growth will be. We are hearing, from 5 to 10 gigawatts in the coming years. Could be more, could be less. One of the things to watch very closely is what happens with quantum computing. If quantum computing really does materialize, that will represent a major, major reduction in energy use. If it doesn't, it will be a very big hit long term. And I spoke to the UC Berkeley chair of the physics department a few months ago, who was saying they're estimating AI could constitute as much as 50% of global electric demand by mid-century. So it certainly is a very, very big potential, but still also a lot of unknowns. And I think my feeling is it is actually possible to meet rapid load growth with clean resources, because we're doing that right now. We've added a colossal amount of capacity in a very short time. I mean, just for perspective, electricity first came to California 175 years ago in San Francisco, 1850. And since then, our state has added 105 gigawatts of utility scale capacity. 30 of that has been since Gavin Newsom took office. So a colossal amount of new capacity, and it's basically all clean. It's solar and batteries, the vast majority of that. And so that is one of the gifts, I would say, of solar and batteries in particular, is that this is a resource that is not complex relative to other generation resources, and that can be deployed in months, not years. So
Right.
we are looking at at a bunch more of that. So if AI does this data center trend kind of materializes as it seems to be, the imperative to me is that we meet that demand with clean resources.
So, well, speaking of that, so let's talk about batteries, because solar, the sun doesn't shine all day, And California has done some amazing things with battery. I've just been amazed to see the growth in utility scale batteries. But there's really two kinds, right? There's utility scale, and then there's home batteries. And home batteries can eventually form a virtual power plant, things like that. Where do you see, well, where are batteries in California to start with? What are the numbers? And where do you see that going in the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, so we need both. I have two. Let me turn this. Move this. Sorry. I have two Powerwall batteries actually on my house. They've worked incredibly well, and again, very easy to install, very fast, super reliable. State of California is adding about 2,000 behind the meter customer owned battery systems a week, and many more on the way. And then utility scale battery storage, outside of China, California is leading the world on this. And we have employed, at this point, we're at about 17 gigawatts of utility scale battery storage. And really, that is a resource. I'm talking about this is installed in the last 6-7 years, right? Really rapid.
Very recently.
Yeah. And it works. And I just want to remind everybody, we had on August 14th and 15th of 2020, we had an outage on our system, which is the first CAISO system outage, since 2001, when I was describing
Enron.
the Enron event. And our mantra after this August and 14th and 15th event of 2020, which affected about 500,000 customers over 3.5 hours over 2 nights, was, never again. Electricity is a resource that really should be thought of like water. People need it. It needs to be reliable. It needs to be accessible, and you depend on it. And so we leaned in really heavily to all the solutions to make that possible. But batteries have been incredibly successful. And so, last year in 2024, we had the hottest temperatures in the history of the state, highest electric demand in the history of the state, and no outages and no flex alerts. So that is really a tribute to storage, because the beauty of storage is taking all this solar and all this wind and geothermal that we have, and it is making it dispatchable, whenever we need it. And it's a beautiful resource. It's, as I said, it's relatively simple, and quick to deploy. I mean, just to compare, I was with a state senator from Georgia this week on this delegation, who was describing to me their Vogtle nuclear power plant, which took 17 years to construct and cost $35 billion for 2 gigawatts. We're getting probably for 20% of that cost in a year or 18 months, getting storage online. So it's just relative to other resources, it is very, very attractive. So there's a lot of that coming in. Our permitting pipeline at the Energy Commission today is about 20 gigawatts of projects, and that is, I think last time I looked, 98% storage and solar.
Yeah, actually, speaking of that, so one of the big problems nationwide for clean energy is permitting. It's getting access to the grid. How does California stand in relation to the rest of the country in terms of getting, I guess batteries, it might be simpler than maybe adding just solar and wind. Can utility scale solar and wind get on the grid in California fairly easily compared to other places?
Well, the part of that we touch is the permitting of the actual project to get built, and we had some reform there, and created a new fast track product, sort of new fast track process, and so we just permitted the largest battery storage project in the world, which is called Darden, and that's in West Fresno County, $5.5 billion project, 4.4 gigawatt hours of storage. And about to start construction. So good developments there. But I think with the CAISO Q, there's still, more work to be done. And my friend Elliot Mainzer, who's CEO of CAISO, is working hard on all that stuff. So I don't mean to say we're through the woods on any of this stuff, but I think the metric to look at is, are we able to keep the lights on, keep grid reliability robust, and continue to decarbonize? And the answer is yes. As you mentioned earlier, we're over 2/3 clean energy on the grid. Our current estimate is about 70% of the power on the California grid is electric, which is incredible. Really, alternative energy is the wrong word to use to describe renewables, and that's something we should all be proud of. And storage has been, fundamental to that proposition.
And getting back to batteries a bit, I'm Mark Jacobson. I'm sure you know, is Stanford professor who's promoting clean energy. I had him on the show, and he publishes these duck curve things showing where batteries are taking over in the evening for fossil fuels, and that piece that's batteries is growing more and more. I mean, dramatically every year. When do you see that filling in 100% of the sort of evening and nighttime?
Yeah, look, but that's absolutely where we're heading. And the state law that Governor Newsom signed requires us to get to 90% clean energy on the grid by 2035,
2035.
and 100% by 2045, and we're absolutely on a path to do that. So it is really exciting. I would say, like, as you get to those last little bits of decarbonization, they become less and less important, right? In other words, like the last 5% of cleaning up the grid is not as important as the next million electric vehicles. Like, in other words, you're displacing more fossil fuels, and there's more imperative to focus resources on electrification. And so that that last 5% is often the hardest and the most expensive. But look, I will just tell you, from doing this work for 25 years, I am absolutely confident we are going to get there. We're going to get it done. There's so many new solutions arriving, including long duration energy storage. This is not lithium based. These are other chemistries, zinc air and iron air chemistry that
Sodium.
can go 100. Yeah, sodium. But these are chemistries that can do 100 hours of storage, right, and provide dispatch features that we haven't seen before. Plus, as you alluded to a few minutes ago, what we can do with demand response and virtual power plants. So we built the largest virtual power plant in the world through the Energy Commission's demand side grid support program, the DSGS program. We stood that up 3 years ago. It's now 1.2 gigawatts with over 100,000 participants. And again, that allows home energy storage systems that people have to be called upon to feed power back into the grid when the grid needs it. Clean resources dispatched from multiple sources at once. And that's a 21st century solution. So all of that is going to come together to get us to 100%. I absolutely believe we'll get there.
Well, speaking of that, there was a controversial decision, which I don't think was the CEC, but to lower the price that is paid to users that sell their solar power back to the grid. Was that CEC involved in that, or was that just the CEC?
No, that's a Public Utilities Commission decision. I won't speak to all the details. I will say, from having done that work for many, many years, I think rooftop solar has a really important role to play. I also think a haircut of some sort was indicated because the cost of solar has been declining, and there are needs that the grid has. I think, but there's ideally, in my view, when you do these things, nothing is too sudden, and I think that can create challenges. So I think the way optimally to do policy is where you have a graduated step down over time that has a lot of visibility and predictability.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that's been a source of a lot of contention. But yeah, that was about probably a year ago, the Public Utilities Commission. Yeah.
So we've been talking almost exclusively now about electricity, which is, my understanding is that 15 to 20% of the California's total energy use. So let's talk a little bit give us an idea of how, because on the commission's website, you say 100% energy, clean energy future. Well, that would include industrial, like making cement and steel and other industrial processes in California, obviously transportation and heating of buildings. So where are we in the sort of the non-electricity side, and where are we going?
Well, I think the main take-home point about this question is that electricity is no longer static in terms of what it can serve. For a long time, electricity was for your home or business, had nothing to do with your vehicle. All right. Now that is changing. We are at 29% of new vehicle sales in California being electric. And it's not just for passenger vehicles. Harbinger in LA is doing class 4, 5, and 6 electric truck chassis, supplying customers like FedEx, which are going 100% electric. And Harbinger's electric truck chassis, as of this summer, is at cost parity with conventional internal combustion engine truck chassis, which is incredible. And they'll be cheaper next year. There is, the long range semis. We have about 100 of these operating in California now. Pepsi uses these out of their Modesto facility, made by Tesla. The longest range that they told me they've done with a fully loaded semi truck is 545 miles on a single charge. Right, this stuff is coming, and it's coming to all these sectors. I mentioned the battery electric ferries coming to the Bay. And even with home appliances, I mean, I use a chainsaw all the time. I was cutting down an old tree the other day, and I use electric chainsaw. It works fantastic. I mean, I didn't know this thing existed until like 6 months ago, and a friend
They work well
showed me
now. They
his.
used to be kind of wimpy, but now
No, it's fantastic. Believe me, I just cut up a whole bunch of firewood, and my hot water, we used to cook on the stove. Now these electric tea kettles. I just got my gas meter removed in my house 2 months ago because our stove, which was our last gas appliance, we got an induction cooktop from Copper. Love it. And so I think the take-home point is that the reach of this clean electricity is extending in ways we never had imagined. Electric aviation is a $6 billion industry in California today. Joby and Archer, and so that's all coming, including some of these industrial end uses. So it will progress in different segments at different rates. But this is why cleaning up the electric grid matters so much. It's not just that it's displacing emissions from the areas where electricity is served to customers today, but from where it will be serving customers tomorrow. So that is super exciting to me. But yeah, there's a bunch of other really exciting measures happening in other sectors, low carbon cement, and so on around the state. And we're just blessed in California to have so much innovation in our state, and we're known for that. And I think there is a sort of California collective muscle, I would say, is the way to think about it, in terms of bringing new things to scale. And we pioneer them here, and they spread. And whether that's the iPhone or Google or an electric car or solar or wind or battery storage, they spread. And so we're putting a lot of resources into these, much more challenging end uses, and things like displacing, gas for, agricultural, food processing applications, and using electric and so on. We're pushing the envelope on all that stuff. It's a journey, but we're making progress every year.
Well, speaking of that, the Trump administration has been trying as hard as it can to roll back progress on clean energy. And you're just talking about all the progress California is making. How is that lack of help from Washington impacting your job and how California is doing?
Well, that's a very diplomatic phrasing of what is, I think, in fact, a war on wind and solar, and a war on California. Has been really, really dispiriting to see this, and really the departure of today's Republican Party from what used to be an all the above energy strategy. I mean, the insanity of issuing a stop work order for an offshore wind project that's 85% complete. By the way, that's using American-made vessels, made in Louisiana, and steal all the things that we're supposedly trying, and that's going to increase energy independence while making the air cleaner. What are
Oh, just lost you, David.
I
Oh, there we are.
find
Okay.
some of this, just really, really maddening and self-defeating. I mean, sending ICE agents into um, a battery factory that Koreans are building in Georgia, and bringing jobs and money and resources and manufacturing capability to the U.S. I mean, what are we doing as a country? And attacking solar and wind in the way that they have. So my biggest hope long term, beyond this current moment, we have to totally depoliticize this space. Clean energy is good for America. It improves our innovation economy. It creates jobs, cleans the air, combats climate change, makes us more resilient. This stuff is good for the United States, and we got to get back to a place where this is in the mom and apple pie category, which it absolutely should be. And that's one thing I was just really encouraged by this week. This delegation of state legislators from around the country. We had a lot of Republicans um, who agree, and that is wonderful. And I welcome that and celebrate that. This is an initiative called the Electric Innovation Initiative that is now we're going to be doing these study tours for state legislators. And got to get back to that. But in the meantime, we have to kind of survive the storm. And look, it's going to make everything harder. What they're doing, cutting tax credits for solar and wind while continuing them for the oil industry, that does have a price impact. President Trump has been talking about affordability. This is going to make electricity more expensive, full stop. So, and by the way, California's especially hurt. But so is Texas. To be honest, they're doing a
Right.
lot of solar and wind. They criticize us over there in Texas, and they copy us. They're doing solar, wind, and batteries. So, limiting the renewable energy tax credits does have an affordability impact as well. Um, and I'll just say, look, I stand ready to work. I think our whole state government stands ready to work with anyone from any party on trying to make things better in the energy space and advance our common goals. There should be a lot more common cause here. And so it has been really disappointing to see. But I think the main take home point for me on this one is we are still locked in. We're not changing our vision and our goals. We're going to persevere. We know it's going to be hard. It is already hard. But we have survived one Trump administration already. We got through that. And one thing to remember about that first Trump administration, if you recall, in 2016 when he ran for office, he was talking about coal. Coal's going to revive and be the future. More coal got retired under Trump's first term than under Obama.
And
And
thank
so
you too. I mean,
I think the point is, once you let the genie out of the bottle with clean energy resources like solar, it's very hard to put it back in. And even without the tax credits, there's so many attractive features of solar because it is so affordable, and it can scale so quickly and be deployed so quickly that it's very difficult to stop. And so I am, despite everything that's happening, I'm still very optimistic long term.
hmm. And speaking of fossil fuels, California is a big fossil fuel
Oh,
producing state with
can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Did I lose you?
No, I can hear you. Ah, we hope to
Can
get
you
David
hear me?
back there. Yes, I
Let
can hear you.
me
Yep.
see what I did here.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. David? You're still there. Testing, let me see, am I on? Let's see. I should be fine. Hey, David? David? I guess we'll edit this part out a little later on. Yep, and Stacy says she can hear both of us. We can hear you.
Okay, sorry, I'm back.
There we go.
I'm not sure what happened there. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You were frozen on my screen. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Anyways, just mentioning
could you hear what I was saying that whole time?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Your mic was fine the whole time.
Okay. Sorry.
I was saying that California produces 300,000 barrels of oil a day, which is not really consistent with the whole clean energy thing. What steps is the CEC taking to move that away in the future, if any? I don't know.
So, in terms of oil production,
yeah, but California produces about 300,000 barrels of oil a day. It's it's an oil producing state. A lot of people don't realize that, but if you drive around,
so we do not deal with oil production at the.
Oh, you don't? That's not the CEC.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, then we can move on. Hey, you have a lot of interesting programs. I mean, looking at the website, and I encourage people to do that. There are links in the description. All kinds of things. One of them is a tribal energy program. Can you just briefly tell us what that is and why is that being done?
Yeah, so this is something that's very much a priority for me personally, for the governor. If you recall, about 6 months into the beginning of Governor Newsom's term in office, when he took office in 2019, he gathered Native American tribes in a grove of trees in Sacramento, and he issued what I consider to be a really, really important, long overdue apology for the loss of lives and land and language that occurred in our state, and really made a pledge to do better by the tribes. Incredibly proud of him for having the courage and the wisdom to do that. I spoke to a number of tribal leaders who were there that day. I know how much that meant. Words matter. And so in ways large and small, since then, the Newsom administration has been trying to fulfill that commitment. And so our part of that at the Energy Commission, we've really set out to advance what we call tribal energy sovereignty. So I convened a meeting together with President Reynolds of both the Public Utilities Commission and the Energy Commission 2.5 years ago on the North Coast with all the North Coast tribes. And the Energy Commission adopted a tribal energy sovereignty resolution, which is in essence a resolution just to support the principle that Native American tribes should be empowered to determine their energy future. And our job is really to support them in doing that. And I've been scrounging every available resource I can possibly muster as chair of the Energy Commission in support of that goal. So we have now deployed about $135 million for 35 different Native American tribes to do clean energy microgrids, EV charging, and other measures that improve energy independence and reduce pollution. The model for this is a great story. This is the Blue Lake Rancheria tribe, which did the first tribal energy microgrids, so solar battery microgrids. They're up in the North Coast. Tribes in the North Coast are especially vulnerable. They're often losing power as many as 10 times a year. So we worked with this one tribe. We did we put in, I think, about $5 million for that microgrid, because there were frequently fires that were burning down transmission. A windstorm blows down, they would lose power. So right after this happened, there was a fire it did burn down to the transmission. We called them to see, hey, were you guys affected? And they weren't even aware that
Well, that's not good.
transmission. And there's a
Just have an
great
alarm go
picture.
off.
There's a great picture from the air of the tribe all lit up. Their first aid clinic is the lights are on, and the surrounding community completely dark. So we're trying to do this all over the state. We have an amazing tribal team leading our work, Sierra Graves and Davina Whitethorn, and we're doing visits with tribes all over. I was just with Middletown Rancheria Tribe on Friday night, and it's a really important part of our work. And I just want to say, nothing can be done that will ever fully make up for the loss of lives and land and language that's happened. But I really believe that working together, we can actually do some very meaningful things to move the ball in the right direction. And we do an annual ceremony, which just happened last week, called California Clean Energy Hall of Fame ceremony, and we award frontline folks leading the way on clean energy solutions. And we always have a tribal champion award. And so the gentleman who won, Chairman Simon of the Middletown Rancheria Tribe, is amazing and helped his tribe get solar. And so there's a lot of that happening, and we're proud to support it.
That's great. I want to get on to some other questions from other people. I'm going to and there's so many, we could talk for another hour here. But another big thing that the CEC has done over the decades, is focus on energy efficiency. And the legendary Art Rosenfeld, who was a commissioner decades ago, and I had the honor of meeting him one time, so it's exciting, really pushed energy efficiency at a time that it wasn't a thing. It wasn't something being talked about. And California really took the lead. Do you have some statistics on that? Because I've heard some amazing things, like per capita energy use stayed steady while the rest of the country went up by 50%.
Yeah, that's more or less right. That's more or less right. And Art Rosenfeld was a legend. I mean, he more or less was the godfather of the field of energy efficiency. And there's a great story, probably my favorite story about him, was that long before hybrids or even electric cars had come to pass, we were all driving just conventional internal combustion engine vehicles. And he did some calculations, because he's a brilliant scientist, and determined that you would save more fuel if you turned your car off at the stoplight and then turn it back on. So this is how he drove. He would pull up to it. There's something very, very funny for me about imagining him turning off his car at every stoplight. But he did amazing work helping advance all these efficiency standards, and even things that are hugely significant but get very little attention, like white roofs. So, that turns out like the cool roof standard that the Energy Commission has is incredibly consequential. You save so much on air conditioning because you reflect back into the atmosphere all this heat gain you'd otherwise have. And as a result of his work and those that followed, we ranked #1 in energy efficiency in the United States. I'm super proud of that. I want to keep that momentum going.
And then that's all implemented through building standards and things like that, right?
We have two things. So Title 24 is our California Building Energy Efficiency Standards, and then Title 20 are our appliance standards. So if you think about, for example, your television, we did a standard on that a few years ago. It cut the energy use of TVs in half. We did a standard on refrigerators. And by the way, refrigerators are actually our very first standard. It's kind of I think it's an interesting story because it shows you how things evolve. When we came out with that standard, we were told by the refrigerator industry, this is going to kill our industry. We'll leave the state. Food will go bad. All this inflammatory rhetoric. And so what actually happened is we cut the energy use of refrigerators 70%. The refrigerators got cheaper and they got bigger. And so I think there's a message there. Don't believe the hype. But we did other things like the plug-in charger standard. So up until a few years ago, you plug your cell phone or your plug-in shaver into a wall. Even after the device is fully charged, you're still losing a little bit, what we call vampire load.
Right.
Why is that? There's a 25-cent shutoff diode that totally fixes that problem. When it's fully charged, it stops collecting power. but the manufacturer wasn't installing that because they don't care. They don't pay the energy bills. We do. And so this is the power of the standard. We said, no, you cannot sell your product into our market of 40 million people unless you install that shutoff diode. That saves $300 million a year. And this, by the way, this kind of dynamic plays out across all of these other industry. Computers, another great example. My advisor, Ken Ryder, did our computer standard. The computer industry said, you cannot build a computer as efficient as you're saying that we need to do. So Ken, who is the electrical engineer, went and bought several computers, took out the most efficient parts from each, rebuilt his own computer using the most efficient parts from all the others, and went back and showed and said, yes, you can. I just built it. And so now that's our computer standard. So this is really the role, I think, of our agency, is to be that kind of beat cop on patrol. And it saves, it's not just it reduces pollution, it does save costs. It means you actually don't have to build more expensive power plants. And so, as Art Rosenfeld famously said, the most important megawatt of power is the one you don't use. And so that is why efficiency first is our mantra. So
Okay.
yeah.
So David, I'd like to bring in Stacy, who's one of our co-mods. She has a question.
Yeah, please.
And then we'll have a question from Eli, and then we'll get a couple of questions from
Sure. Happy
the
to.
YouTube side. Hey, Stacy.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi. Oh, shoot. I forgot to do this. Thank you for being here, David.
Do we have cats? Yeah, we see.
Yep,
Stacy has
yes.
cats. We're trying to increase our viewership by having cat videos.
Oh, good.
Well,
the other one you might hear in the background.
Okay.
He's very vocal.
Okay.
Well, I wanted to thank you for being here and for all of your work. These initiatives are one of the reasons I'm so proud to be a Californian for the majority of my adult life. You described your early time in Washington as ineffective. I think I would yearn for ineffectiveness in Washington over what's happening today. What's your take on how or do we just ignore what's happening at the federal level?
Yeah, thank you for the question. No, can't ignore it. And ultimately we have to recognize we can't have climate repair without democracy repair. And so we have to be fully engaged citizens in every respect. And I think that goes from everything from voting to fighting for those guardrails that we have to have. Because for me, watching what's unfolding here, it's not just, I disagree with shutting down, wind projects that are 85% complete and some of this nonsense. There is outright corruption going on at levels that are unprecedented in the United States. I mean, and hypocrisy. I mean, if you just take here we are doing these strikes on these boats off the coast of Venezuela, supposedly to stop drugs, and then pardoning the biggest drug dealer of all out of Honduras. I mean, and you just get the sense this is an administration that can be bought, and it's really scary because we are supposed to be the beacon of democracy. I'll just share a story that really affected me. Actually, I'm still pretty emotional about it. I was driving home from visiting this chairman of the Middletown Rancheria tribe on Friday night. I'm with my college roommate is in the car with me, and a massive car accident happened right in front of us. We're on southbound I-80, right by the San Pablo Dam Road. Probably 5 cars. I used to be a firefighter for 4 years and an EMT. Got out, stopped traffic. Pretty intense situation. Got this guy out of the car. The family that was really hurt was a Latino family. Didn't speak English. The child was 4. Both my friend and I had blood all over us. Pretty dramatic. The thing that really stuck, and everybody's going to live. There was no fatalities, but this mother of this 4-year-old kid is quite badly hurt. The police are coming, and she is concerned about ICE at that moment. She's going to be deported. And there's somebody sorry, it's just really, yeah. I mean, it just It's so maddening, like at a moment like that where your child has been hit by a car, and you're then having
That's your
to think
concern.
about that. That's your concern. But that's the country we live in. The budget for ICE is bigger than the Marine Corps, and so it's unacceptable. And we can't ever let this be normalized. I think the main thing I worry about is somehow we gradually come to accept this, and accept the unacceptable. And no, so I still believe in our democracy and our power to make change. And fortunately for all of us, elections are still run at the state level, and that is really important. And there are decent people out there across the country who of both parties who share a view of some lines that shouldn't be crossed. And so we gotta keep fighting with all we got to protect our democracy as we move forward on all these other issues we're working on.
Great. So I'm
I
going to
hear.
go to Eli for a quick question. Then Stacey will come back and we'll do
See you in a
some
bit.
others. I have to go to. Hey, Eli, welcome. What's your question for David?
Hi, thanks. Actually, two, but they're both quick. How has renewables adoption differed between municipally owned and private utilities? And does any contrast vary between metropolitan and rural?
Great question. Yeah. So the good news is actually we're doing really well across all those sectors. Both investor-owned utilities and publicly owned utilities are actually on track. They're hitting all the targets that are laid out in the law, which requires us to get to 90% clean energy by 2035. We have 43 publicly owned utilities and three big investor-owned utilities, and they're all proceeding well. The thing that is happening kind of inside that structure is that I think is particularly noteworthy is the community choice aggregator role, which is these are entities that do not own or maintain electric lines, but they deliver electric service, and they do procurement, but they use the lines and the networks of the investor-owned utilities, and those tend to be. So I would say about a quarter or so, maybe 30% of our state's electric demand is met through the community choice aggregators, and they tend to be slightly greener and slightly cheaper than the rest of what the investor-owned utility service territories offer. But generally, everybody is tracking pretty well. And so that's a big deal because it wasn't clear when we started that we are going to get this rate of compliance. But basically, we're on track across all those sectors. And in terms of rural, I think rural and urban are both on track. I haven't looked at the breakdown between the two areas, but basically we're in compliance. When we get our reports from all these utilities, we're pretty much in compliance across the entire state.
That's great. Second question, beyond lower is better, are there any falling price thresholds for photovoltaics and batteries and wind turbines, which would bend the curve to accelerate the transition even more?
Yeah, so already today, solar is the cheapest resource in the world. That's true domestically and internationally. Great stat on this. In 2004, it took a year to build a gigawatt of solar globally. In 2010, it took a month. In 2016, it took a week to build a gigawatt. In 2023, it took a day. In 2024, it took half a day. And it's now the largest investment on the global electric grid in the world. It's in excess of $500 billion a year for solar, and we're just getting started. So I am very, very optimistic about the growth of solar. I think so I don't have like a specific cost threshold because a lot of it is policy driven. It's not just what the price of renewables are, it's also how big is the incentive for the fossil. For example, if you're in the natural gas industry and you're exempted, as we are today, from the Safe Drinking Water Act, or you're in the coal industry and you've had all these federal subsidies for rail line extensions to subsidize the transport of coal. I mean, those things all affect the power markets, of course, relative to what you're competing against. But I think the most important thing we could do is actually what the Biden administration had done, which is a long-term stable incentive program. And so that's what's been so destructive, is we had that for a few years and had a 10-year runway, and that would have made the transition go even faster. But look, here's the thing. What will happen, the way to think about the whole energy transition is Trump can slow it, but he can't stop it. And I think this is true both with renewables, which they're better, they're simpler, they're cleaner, they're faster to deploy, they're easier to maintain, and with electric vehicles, which, he can cut the incentives here as he has, eliminated the tax credit. Well, look what's happening. China is now over 50% of their vehicle sales are electric. I had a friend who was at the Shanghai Auto Show last week. He said 90% of the models on their biggest auto show in the country are electric. So, the energy transition is going to progress. It's just we're not going to be leading it for a little while. But we at the state level can still, push the ball forward, us and other states, and make it through the storm.
Great. So then we have a few questions from the YouTube Live, and let's start with this one. Any prognosis on the amount of carbon removal, gigatons of CO2 per year, that will be needed to achieve net zero as the end tail of diminishing returns you talked about earlier?
Yeah, great question.
We didn't talk about
I don't have
capture, but you mentioned it briefly.
So the answer is a lot. I don't have a gigaton number to give you, but I can say I'm a big believer in direct air carbon capture. I think even if we get to 100% clean energy on the grid, as we will, we're going to need that. And so we fought to create a new direct air carbon capture program, which we're funding. We're pushing out, $14 million of grants we just did for that, to promote some of these next generation technologies to remove carbon. And there's some other promising techniques, pyrolysis and so on, that have to happen. And so it's not enough to just reduce our production of emissions. We do have to have strategies to remove the CO2 blanket of pollution that's out there in the atmosphere, and so that's a core part of the job. And again, this would be great to be able to do this in partnership with the federal government, but of course, those funds have been cut by the Trump administration.
And how about for point source, like from a cement plant? Are any demonstrations happening in California yet?
Yeah, there's a couple efforts actually right here in the Bay Area that we have been supporting. And I think, let's see, Blue Planet was one of them, and then there's one in Oakland, the name of which I am forgetting. Yeah, it's a Brimstone. That's it. So some good stuff happening here to do low carbon cement, and that's really welcome.
Okay. The other question regarding nuclear, which we didn't, I meant to ask you about, but didn't get to that. So is it time for us to consider small modular reactors? He's talking about in Canada, they get the majority of their grid electricity from nuclear and hydro. But what's your thoughts on nuclear? It's been controversial in California, shutting down plants. Do you see a role for SMRs in the future?
Yeah, so nuclear generally, we built 5 nuclear plants in the state of California. 4 of those have been decommissioned. The last remaining one is Diablo Canyon. And then there has been a lot of talk about small modular reactors. I'm certainly open to learning more about those, but right now, that's so far been a lot of talk. We haven't seen, there's only 2 new nuclear plants that have been constructed in the United States so far this century, and that's Watts Bar in Tennessee and Vogtle in Georgia. And that experience is not encouraging. As I mentioned, Vogtle in Georgia took 17 years and cost $35 billion. It's the single most expensive power procurement in the history of the United States. So that's not the path we want to go down. But definitely open to learning more on SMRs. I think
Yeah, they're not
that
quite here yet.
obviously, would require a change of statute in California to even contemplate that, because right now it's banned until there's a solution for the waste, and there isn't in state. So that decision is above my pay grade. But I guess the main point I want to make is that what energy storage is doing now, I think, is incredibly compelling and exciting. And as I mentioned, it's not just that the storage fleet is huge. 17 gigs, getting that built in the last 6-7 years is incredible. But it's getting, it's been reliable and dispatchable, and getting to scale, and it's also working on the customer side of the meter. So I personally think that the single most exciting energy industry for the next decade is battery energy storage, and people are not understanding how consequential and valuable that resource is, and it really does meet our needs. So, and for the near term, that is really what's going to be saving our bacon, just renewables and storage.
Very good. And well, speaking of that, Stacy has one more question for you.
And David, I insisted on this because the chance of you getting to Washington is not zero. And so we had a friend from Pennsylvania say solar is great in sunny areas, but him living in Pennsylvania, the winter they need home heating, and their solar capacity is very low, less than 10%. And wind is only at 20%. What can they do to decarbonize?
Yeah, so I went to college in Pennsylvania, and
Where'd you go?
I went to Swarthmore outside of Philadelphia.
Okay,
Yeah.
I had a friend.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep, was in the Swarthmore Fire Department for 4 years, and have very, very fond
Oh my
fond
goodness.
memories of my time in Pennsylvania. But look, I think one thing we didn't talk about today much is offshore wind. That is also a very, very compelling resource. So our state goal is 25 gigawatts of offshore wind, and the turbine size that are happening now is just amazing. So they have turbines in the market now that do basically one rotation of the turbine powers 2 houses for a day. And the wind regime generally off the coast is way better than it is on land. So a lot more reliable and strong. And so, you've got to look at places like Denmark, which now gets, half of its power from wind. They have over 500 turbines installed offshore. And these can be floating, they can be fixed bottom. The ones we're doing in California are going to be floating, because we have a deep water shelf. The East Coast shelf is shallow. So obviously we have a hostile administration right now for that, but there are a number of projects that are completed and are operating great in Rhode Island and across the East Coast, and more on the way. And fortunately, those 2 projects that Trump did stop, Empire Wind and Revolution Wind in New York and Rhode Island, respectively, actually both prevailed ultimately.
Right, they had lawsuits, right? Yeah.
One by a lawsuit and one by an agreement, and are on track to be finished in I think actually one of them is finishing up this month, and the other is a few months down the line. Those are coming online. That's going to help a lot with decarbonization. And then, the grid, of course, is expanding and getting more interconnected over time. And so you can be, sending surplus wind and solar power and battery storage power from one region to another with more and more ease. So that's going to help, decarbonize.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that he's talking about here about capacity factors, which you apply to a power plant. They're very different for solar. Solar is always low, and yet it's still, when you smooth all that out, it's still amazingly cheap because you have a free source of energy coming to those.
It is,
panels.
yeah, but again,
So,
like
so it's a little deceptive to talk about capacity factors.
Right, and again, I just want to highlight solar is fantastic, but the beauty of clean energy, there's many sources. I mean, in the Northeast, hydro, right, is a huge source, and that is big source. Geothermal is coming online. Offshore wind, terrestrial wind, rooftop solar, utility scale solar, energy storage to tie it all together, and other resources. So it's not a silver bullet; it's silver buckshot.
Very good.
I wanted to follow up on something that Dan had asked about, because I had it as one of my questions as well. I love being a Californian and all that we're doing, but all of the renewables are just replacing or just to accommodate new use. We're not getting rid of fossil fuels, and as Dan mentioned, we're producing what, 300,000 barrels a day. California, the greenest state in the union, is also a petro state. So it's hard to think, if we can't do it here, where can we do it? And
Getting rid of fossil fuels.
who's controlling oil production policy if not your commission?
Yeah, so there's a whole division within the California Natural Resources Agency that is called CalGEM, and that oversees oil production. But I would say, the most important thing we can do is reduce demand, right? And so we are reducing gasoline consumption in California about 1% every year. And that is why some of the refiners have already exited the state and more are being planned. As I mentioned, we're at about 201,000 public EV charge plugs versus only 120,000 gasoline nozzles. And we want to keep the momentum going on building out that fast charging infrastructure to make it easy for people to go electric, and encourage all your listeners to visit electricforall.org to learn how you can get a charger, how you can get a car, and all the incentives that are available and so forth. That is really, really key to the long-term solution. This is not going to happen as fast as one might like, but it is trending towards clean energy. And I think the main thing I want to stay focused on is making all of this work and tying everything together and showcasing that it can be done. And I want to highlight everything that we've talked about, these milestones of getting from 1% of new construction being all electric a decade ago to 80% today, getting to 2.5 million electric vehicles on the road, getting 7% clean energy and 2.2 million heat pumps and all the rest. That has all happened at the same time as our economy has been growing. And so we were the 10th biggest economy in the world, 12 years ago. We're the 5th biggest today. And I think it's a really important
Fourth.
message.
We're the fourth.
Actually, Japan, well, it could be. I haven't seen the latest. We were going back and forth with Japan, but we could be fourth today. But the point is, we have become very, very competitive. And so that is something I think we need to tell that story better. That this stuff is not just compatible with growth, it's helping drive jobs and manufacturing, in our state. We got 60 different companies making electric vehicles and batteries of one form or another around the state. And, we're become a destination state for clean tech investment, and that's a good thing for all of us.
Yeah, so that's, by the way, so California, you mentioned your friend who took that computer and made it work and just showed everybody it could be done. Well, California is showing that it can be done for the rest of the country and the rest of the world. So that's a very important aspect of what's happening here as well. And David, I want to thank you. This has been a really interesting, far-ranging discussion about lots of different things, and we could go on for another hour easily with all the other things. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for telling us what's been going on in California with the Energy Commission in particular and what you're doing. And thank you. It's really been really fascinating.
Hey, my pleasure, you guys. Appreciate it. Have a great rest of your Sunday.
Very good. So we're gonna do
Thank you.
Okay.
a fade out here. Very good. Thanks, David.
Okay.
Bye.